Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. We got two awesome guests coming up at the end of the show. We got a Princeton math professor, and then we have a pastor to talk more about Marxism infusing its way into the church. That's all coming up today. I suppose, though, we need to take a couple minutes to talk about Kamala Harris. I got my hot takes on Kamala Harris being the VP ticket for Biden. Okay, so bottom line, this will not move the needle at all. There are going to be some polls that come out today or tomorrow, and the headlines are going to be, Biden sees 10-point spike. And everyone loves Kamala, whatever. Don't pay attention to that. That's just people wanting to seem informed when they get a call from the pollster, right? So like, oh, yeah, no, great pick. Really support that. Awesome. Wait a couple days, and that will all be gone. She is not the person to drive voters to the polls for Biden. She's not. We know she's not. She ran for president a couple months ago. She didn't win at all. She got like 9th place or something. Here's the most amazing fact. 49% of Democrats, this is a Rasmussen poll, 73% of Republicans, but 49% of Democrats don't think Biden will make it through a 4-year term if he wins. That is a stunning admission from Democrats. Right? Has that ever happened where someone's running for the first time for president and half the people in the party are like, oh yeah, he's going to die soon. Like, no, like he's definitely, like, no way is he going to live for like, what? Or, oh yeah, he's losing his mind. He's got dementia or something. He's not going to live. Like, that's an amazing thing. So here's prediction / advice to the Biden campaign. I think the Biden, well, I don't know if they will do this, but they should do this if they were smart. They need to just forget about Joe Biden. They need to lean into, not even Kamala, because she's so unlikable. So they need to lean into it's historic. Oh, it's historic. A vote for Biden is really a vote for Kamala, which is really, as we all know, wink, wink, a vote for the first black woman president. That's who you're really voting for, the first black woman president. But you have to, right? They're going to use the same rhetoric we've been talking about these last few weeks and months. You have to do it, otherwise you're racist. You want to be anti-racist, right? Well, you have to vote for the first female black president. If you don't, you're racist. Don't you want to break the glass ceiling? Well, if you don't vote for Biden, then you are the glass ceiling. That's how they need to frame this moving forward. She needs to be the top of the ticket, which is really a bummer for them because no one likes Kamala, right? We have a pretty good idea about how much people like Kamala. She got 844 votes in the primary, all right? 844 votes. I almost got 844. She barely beat me in the Democratic primary. Marianne Williamson, just for a little comparison, she got 22,000 votes. Now, Kamala's defense, she dropped out before she got to the real primaries, but that's the point. She dropped out before she got to the real primary. She couldn't get any excitement when she ran for office, so why would anyone believe that now people are like, oh, I love Kamala all of a sudden? Biden really needed to pick someone outside of the game if he wanted to shake things up. Like the whole point everyone was making during the primaries was like, this is the best we got. The Democrats were saying, they're like, oh, geez, this is our crew. No, the crew was terrible. Your bench was no good. You got to go outside the bench. He had to pick someone like Oprah or like a Serena Williams or Cardi B. I don't know. Someone outside of the whole thing to really shake things up. Cardi B's a joke, but I'm being serious about the sentiment though. I don't know, I'm just off the top of my head, I don't know who else that would be, but like truly like someone like a Will Smith, right? Or like someone that the entire Democratic Party did not roundly reject a couple months ago. How about that for a good standard on who we should go for? And anyone off the bench, they were like, how about Tammy Duckworth? What do you like she was in the right Tammy Duckworth? You guys are way out of the game. This is why one of the main reasons why Trump won, right? He was an outsider. Biden needed to bring in an outsider, especially because everyone thinks he's going to die in the next couple of years. All right, so this is maybe a sign that they will take my advice from a second ago. This is an email that Biden's people sent to his support. Actually, before we put that up, guys, this is what Obama wrote in 2008. So this is the email that Barack Obama wrote in 2008 about Joe Biden. Friend, I have some important news that I want to make official. I've chosen Joe Biden to be my running mate. That's good, right? I've chosen Joe Biden to be my running mate. Here's what Biden said yesterday. I've decided that Kamala Harris is the best person to help me take this fight to Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and then to lead this nation starting in January 2021. It's a weird way to word that, isn't it? Doesn't that make it seem like she's the best person to help me take the fight, and then to and then make it seem like she's the one who's going to do the leading in January 2021? Like, that's a weird way to put that. So we got some great guests here coming up, so that we'll keep it quick. I want to get leaving them plenty of time, but just know the media is going to fawn for the next couple months, and it's like I said, it's going to be all this like, she's like Joan of Arc, right? Like, she's the first black female, but she's gonna be amazing, right? Remember this gem? This is from CNN's national political reporter who was assigned to the Kamala campaign. I thought we had the video. Anyway, I'll just tell you what it is. It was like, actually, I think I got it right here. She was, they were going shopping together. And they made her try on this coat. And they're like, you go, girl. This is your Mardi Gras jacket. Oh, it's so awesome. I love it. # campaign fashion report. All right. That was the woman in charge of covering Kamala. Hard-hitting stuff. So just get ready for just fawning like you've never seen. Kamala Harris is just Joan of Arc, Rosa Parks, and Gandhi all rolled into one. She's the most amazing person ever walked the planet. She's smart, strong. Wait for all the puff pieces about her Indian heritage. So it's gonna be a weird thing. They have to play up black and Indian to right. They're just gonna totally trip over themselves to make her super likable when she's just not. And you're gonna get a ton of hackery like this from Sean King. He's like, when she was running and all the Democrats, and this is part of it, right? Everyone does this to an extent every 4 years. But he talked about Kamala and her terrible criminal justice reform and whatever. Joe and Kamala, they both helped build and advance mass incarceration. And then yesterday, oh, this is great. I'm incredibly proud to see a brilliant black woman. This is what dreams are made of. You're like, all right, Sean. I want to go here. We'll save this for another day. We could talk about Kamala's ambition, although I will let Jesse Kelly's tweets from last night speak for themselves on her ambition back in San Francisco. But I think the worst thing that she did was, you're going to hear all this stuff about what she did when she was California's Attorney General and when she was San Francisco District Attorney, like being tough on crime and arresting people on marijuana charges and all that stuff, whatever. To me, there's a guy running, this is 2018, there's a guy running or getting approved for a judgeship in Nebraska, and he was in the Knights of Columbus. And she wrote him this question like, did you know that you were joining an all-male society that's opposed to a woman's right to choose? And he's like, yeah, it was a Catholic organization. And in a sane world, every Catholic would be against abortion. But how dare you be a member of it? The worst thing that Kamala did was David Daleiden or David whatever. He's the guy from the Center for Medical Progress. Remember that a couple years ago, and they did those undercover videos about Planned Parenthood? And that was all in California. Instead of going after these centers, these abortion centers for selling illegal body parts, or body parts illegally, Kamala, the AG, went after David. He went after the guy. This was 2016. She ordered a search warrant on his house. His one-bedroom apartment, just turned over everything, 11 agents, right, turned the whole thing, took all the computers and did the whole thing. And she was using her power to be the top cop, talk about establishment, to do the bidding of a major political donor. That was Planned Parenthood. And then Jerry Brown, the governor at the time, signed a law making it illegal to secretly record healthcare providers, just to make sure that these undercover videos would never happen again. And there were emails back and forth, and we'll show them another day. There's plenty of time here. There are emails back and forth between Kamala's office and the Planned Parenthood lawyers to draft that legislation. And all the Planned Parenthood edits made it into the final legislation. So that story right there, I think that's the worst. And it's somewhere between Kamala's your run-of-the-mill, pro-abortion activist, to a more shady, willing to use her power as top cop to take down political enemies, right? So you're somewhere in there. But either way, get ready for her being the greatest person to ever walk the planet or something. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So this is a beautiful thing right here. This is the first sentence of the local paper in Seattle. Right? Seattle City Council members have officially approved legislation enacting sizable cuts to the police department's budget. Sizable cuts, okay. So before I tell you how sizable, 7-1 in the Seattle City Council. The one vote against cutting the police department budget, the one vote against was because she didn't think the cuts were enough. Okay, that was from the avowed socialists on the council. She didn't think the cuts were enough. When I hear sizable cuts, I think like 2%, 4, 5%, 41%. They cut the police budget 41%. Are you kidding me? This is from the city council president. The blueprint, decriminalize Seattle. Isn't that amazing? They call it, these people are so good. They called it decriminalize Seattle. The plan to cut the police budget, 41% is called decriminalize Seattle. And it's going to do the exact opposite. Has provided a path forward, includes city-funded research done by BIPOC communities, that is Black, Indigenous, people of color, to provide, among other things, a plan on what health and safety actually means. Included but not limited to alternatives to policing. Instead of buying bullets, violence, and intimidation, we're choosing to invest in peace and restoration in a community that has been ravaged by generations of racism. That's the city council president. So in light of this, the police chief resigned. So the budget passed, the police chief resigned. Now, when I say police chief, imagine this person in your head. I would imagine the Seattle police chief. What does the Seattle police chief look like? Clearly a pretty racist person. It says right here, the city's been ravaged by generations of racism. So clearly we have like a Klan member running the Seattle Police Department. The police chief, until 2 days ago, was a Black woman. She's been on the force for 28 years. How many woke points do you get for leading a Black female police chief to resignation? Isn't that amazing? How woke do you think you are? Or do you get to claim you are? Do you get to celebrate you are that you got a Black woman police chief to leave? Amazing. I got a couple more examples of chaos that we'll get to in a second, but before we get to those, is it wrong of me to say, you know what? Seattle, Portland, Chicago, New York, I'm not rooting for your failure per se, but I hope you reap what you're sowing quickly. If anything, I feel like that's very compassionate of me, right? Because I hope the pain that you're inflicting upon yourself comes quickly and swiftly, and then you can get back to reality fast. So I'm not rooting for like a natural disaster or anything. I just want you to get exactly what you're voting for. And again, that's compassion. The mean callous thing for me to say would be, I hope the pain of what you're doing to yourself comes slowly and lasts forever and you never recover. That would be the cruel thing for me to say. I'm not saying that. I hope that whatever you're doing to yourself happens fast and it's over soon. I'm thinking of Romans 1:24. God gave them over in their sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies to one another. But I feel a little bit like this, like, you know what, Seattle, you win. I give you over to the sinful desires of your heart. Have at it now, Seattle, and I hope your justice is swift. Because what more can you do? What more can I do? What more can anyone do? People voted for these people, that extremist, the Marxist, socialist I was talking about. Her last name's like Sawant or something like that. The full-blown, like unrepentant socialist. She was reelected for her third term last year. So it's not like the voters of Seattle are hoodwinked by any of this. It's not like they're tricked. It's not like, we thought we were electing conservatives. All of a sudden, she's a socialist. Who knew? This is like, you knew. So good for you now. I just gotta hope you get it good and hard. That's what you've been voting for. So New York City, I love this story so much. This is so good. So New York City is voting to cut their budget, their police department budget by $1 billion. One of the council people, one of the city council members, her name is Vanessa Gibson. She's like, this is crazy. Like we want more cops in the community. Stop cutting the police budget. If anything, we should be adding to the police budget. Now, same thing we did with the Seattle police chief. Vanessa Gibson, picture Vanessa Gibson in your head, all right? It's New York City council member Vanessa Gibson. She's calling for more police, right? So she's got to be super racist. She's clearly a super racist Klans member who's still somehow on the city council in New York City because she's like represents some like old rich money legacy racist district in the city or something. And she's been there for 40 years and Rich Whitey still keeps electing her. And she wants more of the racist police force, which was founded out of the slave patrols in the South, we're told all the time. And she wants to protect Rich Whitey with more police, right? That's Vanessa Gibson, right? No, she's black. She represents West Bronx. All right, so West Bronx, it's all black and Hispanic. So you think, oh, well, she must be some sort of Uncle Tom. She must be some rogue, because she's like Candace Owens, undercover, rogue, black, Uncle Tom conservative. No, she's Democrat. Remember, this is one of the most amazing polls of the year. 81% of black people, so think of all the abolish the police rhetoric and the activists, blah, blah, blah. 81% of black people want the same or more police presence. It's 61% want the same, 20% want more police presence in their neighborhood. This is great. This is the New York Times. Lori Cumbo, a black councilwoman from Brooklyn, who's the majority leader, compares calls to defund the police to colonization pushed by white progressives. Robert Cornegy Jr., a black councilman from Brooklyn, called the movement political gentrification. Mayor Raz Baraka, Newark, called defunding the police a bourgeois liberal solution. Another person, you can't just say, imagine if half the police force was gone. You have to think about things you get because of that. All right, here's Gibson. If I go tell them, my residents, there'd be less police, they would not be happy. Aleki Ampry Samuel, black councilwoman from Brooklyn, said that the defunding the police any more than what they're doing right now would be detrimental to my community in Brownsville. All right, so this is so amazing right here. You have this whole defund the police nonsense. It's not coming from black leaders. I'd argue, maybe not even coming from in the cities. It's a rich, white, liberal, virtue signaling thing. It's look how woke I am. I just got the black female police chief fired in Seattle. That's how woke I am. And now look how woke I am. I think we should defund the police. Meanwhile, by the way, in Seattle, the whole city council is white. They're all white. Or white adjacent would be the terms. Because there's two white Hispanics or white passing people. And then you have the socialist who's from India, right? But there's no black people in the city council. There's no black people in Seattle. It's only 1% of they're only 1% of the population anyway. But anyway, point is, this is a luxury belief. Defunding the police is a luxury belief. Remember Rob Henderson? We have him on the show a bunch. He's the guy who came up with this term. This is something that rich white people, let me do this back. We can do this forever, but back in the day, people used to show their elite status by luxury goods. But now everyone can buy luxury goods. Literally, you can buy anything. You got a credit card, you can go buy anything. You'll be in debt up to your eyeballs forever, but you can go buy it, right? So we need a new way to project our elite status to people. So we come up with these luxury beliefs. And it's something that rich white people can project to the world to show how woke they are. Meanwhile, either they don't really prescribe to this, whatever they're saying, or they have enough money and connections that they can be buffered from the ramifications of them. But the ideas trickle down to lower income people who are actually negatively affected by these things. So the rich white people either have a doorman or have their own private security or live in these nice neighborhoods or have a gated community or whatever. So they say, oh, defund the police, right? But if you live low income New York City, you can't afford your own private security. So that idea trickles down and hurts the very people who they say they're trying to help, but they don't really care about that person. Here's an example. LA City Council member, his name's Mike Bonin or something like that. He voted to defund the LAPD by $150 million. He's called the LAPD 8 times since April to go to his house for extra patrols from protesters. Since April, 8 times since April. So extra police for me, but not for thee. So listen, again, these cities, at this point, it's like, whatever, man, do whatever you want. I give you over to the sinful desires of your art. And I hope they get whatever their hearts desire. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, really honored about our next guest. Let me give you the quick background. So it was on July 4th, Princeton students put together a list of 48 demands to the Princeton faculty or the Princeton leadership. And they were like crazy things. And I totally ignored it, didn't think it was anything. And then a couple days later, 350 faculty members signed on to it. I was like, holy cow. So one of them was that this committee board, a faculty committee, should be set up to investigate and discipline racist behaviors, incidents, research, and publications on part of the faculty, which is like bonkers. But there were 48 things that were all crazy. There were three professors that I know who have spoken out. Professor Katz, last week we talked with John Londrigan at Princeton, and then the third is Sergio Klannerman, who is the Higgins Professor of Mathematics at Princeton. Professor, how are you, sir?
Thank you so much. I should say
I don't want to talk.
I should say that
Please.
there are more people who would speak out, and presumably you'll hear more in the future.
Good, I hope so. But I think it's because of you three in particular. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the list of 48 demands because I want to talk about what to do next. But real quick on that, what did you think when you first read this, and why did you want to speak out at all?
Actually, it's a very good point because until now, until that letter, I was worried, and of course I knew a lot of stories. I would read constantly about terrible stories that are happening in academia, but I never wrote anything, actually. I was a mathematician. All my, everything I wrote was mathematical jargon, technical. Maybe I get 100 people who would read my papers if I'm lucky. But I thought that this is becoming really bad. It's very dangerous, and I'm at a position in my life where I could actually speak out, and I shouldn't be afraid. And I also thought that maybe this would be an example for other people to speak out.
And indeed it was. Let's go back. Do you mind telling me a little bit about your life in Romania and what perspective that gave you that you're seeing today?
Yes, so obviously I was educated in communist Romania. I left when I was 25, so actually I got a lot of this education in Romania. The technical education was not so bad, so in math was not bad, but everything that had to do with the ideology, of course, was terrible. And there was this incredible disconnect between what people would talk among themselves and what was the official reality, which was imposed at all levels, through radio, TV, through propaganda at schools, universities, and so on and so forth. So this was this immense disconnect. And people, of course, would not dare to speak in public. And this brings me to the situation now where so many people that I know who actually have tenure, let's say, I mean, in principle, tenure is supposed to give you immunity to all this nonsense, and they are worried to speak out. I mean, they feel that if they speak out, something is going to happen to their careers. They're going to get singled out somehow as terrible people. Anyway, it's this kind of consideration that made me speak out.
Yeah. What's an example of a disconnect back when you were in Romania between what you were told to think and what people were actually saying quietly?
Almost everything. I mean, the party propaganda was mentioning, this enormous enthusiasm that the country has, for example, for Ceausescu. Ceausescu was a dictator of Romania at the time when I was in university school, high school even, at university, and there was all this incredible enthusiasm that the country had for him, even though obviously they despised him, and of course concerning any kind of any kind of political stance of the party. People were supposed to be enthusiastic about it, even though obviously they thought it was crazy. So among themselves, they would make jokes and they would criticize. Those who were more courageous, others were worried. I mean, there was also a difference when I was at university. We could speak out among ourselves. In the 50s, even this was impossible. I mean, you would speak out, and most probably there would be somebody who would denounce you to the police, to the secret police, and you'll get into real trouble, right? So but by the time I was mature, this was not really so. We could still talk among ourselves. There were lots of jokes, as I said. So there was this disconnect was pretty obvious.
Yeah. What do you say to the people who are like, "Oh, Sergiu, you're overreacting. Okay, this is not communist Romania. No one's going to drag you away and put you in the gulags or whatever. You're making too big of a deal about it here in America." What do you say?
It is correct. I mean, it's obviously not nearly as bad as it is in Romania, but we should also make sure that it doesn't get there. I still think that it has a huge impact on education in the United States. People are worried to speak out against all sorts of crazy things that are pushed by the extreme left. You can just look at what happens at universities. I mean, people, the voices, I mean, first of all, they talk about diversity and inclusion all the time, right? So they increased enormously the bureaucracy of the university based on diversity and inclusion. But diversity and inclusion has nothing to do with diversity of opinion. In fact, it's the opposite. Universities today really don't encourage difference of opinion at all.
Have you noticed a change over your time at Princeton or just in universities in general in America, of where university used to be a place to go and have your opinions challenged and to speak freely, into whatever this silencing is today? Have you noticed that difference?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I came, as I wrote in one of my articles, when I came, this was the American university system was the freest possible in the world. It was totally immune to any considerations of race or color or where you come from or sex. And it was just based on excellence and hard work. And now this has completely changed. Yeah, I mean, radically changed. I mean, it is frightening, actually.
You said that hard work, that's a white supremacist value, Sergiu, hard work.
Yeah, apparently. But, paradoxically, talking about the fact that this is a white supremacist thing is really hurting the minorities most. Because, in the end, they're still going to be judged. No matter what, they're still going to be judged about what they do and how they do it. And by telling them somehow that this is a white supremacy thing, so they don't have to worry about, because it's bad, they don't have to worry about hard work, they don't have to worry about doing well in school, that's very bad for them. I mean, I think it's doing exactly the opposite of what these supporters of this nonsense.
This is what they say they want. This is a two-part question. Do you hear any similar messages from your students, particularly, I know you have a lot of students from China. So do you hear anything similar with their experiences growing up in China of your in Romania? That's part one. And then part two is, what do you think it would take to take us from where we are today, where it's like a silencing of speech and a freezing of speech, to like the next level that they had in Romania and have in China, where it's like the government cracking down and it's very dangerous? Like, what's going to take us from where we are to that?
Okay, very good question. So I'm not worried that this is going to happen all of a sudden by some kind of revolution. I'm more worried about a decline of values, academic values in particular, in our universities. The fact that more and more speech is going to be, it's not going to be allowed. I mean, any kind of speech which is not acceptable will not be allowed. There will be a a push for lowering the standards at all levels, because that's the only way you are going to. How are you going to get racial equality according to what they want, which is based on numbers, right? How many people of colors you have, and so on and so on. And by the way, actually, this business of people of colors is also an interesting issue in its own right, because there are actually a lot of people of color coming from India and China and so on. But leaving that aside, I mean, I think the effort of the administration is concerning African Americans. And I don't know, introducing quotas, for example, would definitely lead to a decline of excellence in universities.
I know you, I really got about a minute or so. I know you spoke about charter schools in one of your essays, but there's no way that the far left will actually be supporting charter schools or Princeton supporting charter schools, which is such a shame, because that's the way that we can actually help people who are stuck in these failing public schools, right?
That's true, yeah, but this is awful. And of course, as I said in my article, I was particularly influenced by this position of Thomas Sowell, who is a very famous, very distinguished Black African American economist, who has very courageously spoke out in favor of the charter schools, and explaining how charter schools actually are doing a fantastic job in terms of educating the minorities. So it's really hypocritical and terrible hypocritical on the left to be so much against these charter schools in situations where the charter schools are actually producing results. And of course, Thomas Sowell in his book, he gives many examples in New York City about how wonderful some of these charter schools are.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so many of these kids would be eligible for Princeton and of that level if they had these opportunities in charter schools. Your last line, you said, we have to stop being frightened, intimidated, and afraid to fight back. Why are people so afraid, and how do we not be afraid?
I mean, it's a great question. I don't quite understand. There are so many people. I get emails all the time of people expressing support for what I'm doing, but saying that they're not even dare to put my articles on their Facebook because they would be of the consequences. I mean, it is really stunning, and by itself is sort of a very serious issue that I think our society should really start taking it into account.
Yeah, we only got about 30 seconds, sir. Have you been following this 2 + 2 could equal 5 controversy going around there?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, I can't take it seriously, but maybe at some point I have to. I don't know.
Is there any scenario where 2 + 2 could equal 5?
Well, I mean, if you define 5 to be 4, right? I mean, imagine. Then it will work out, right? So if you change the names, it will work out very well.
Yeah, and that's what they say you should be allowed to do. Sergiu Kleinerman, Higgins professor of mathematics at Princeton. Professor, I just want to encourage you and thank you, and hopefully your courage will spread to others, and we can put a stop to all this.
Well, thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak.
Yeah, let's do it again. Sergiu from Princeton. Thanks, Sergiu. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk to a pastor about Marxism and all this racism stuff coming into our churches, how we can put a stop to that. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we did our special on Marxism in the church, and it was so eye-opening to me and enlightening, and we talked to some amazing guests, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. So I want to keep that conversation going here a little bit, because the question is, and I remember Tom Askell said this, he said, do we believe that the gospel is enough? Because if we let Marxism and if we let the tools of the world with the woke religion and all the rest, if we let those tools of the world come into the church, then we're saying the gospel is not enough. I happen to believe that we should have the gospel we have a thing or two to teach the world in the church, not the world teaching us a thing or two. Dr. Matt Stamper is here to speak on this a bit. Matt, how are you, brother?
Hey, doing fine. How are you this morning?
Good, man. I love your Tennessee accent. I miss Tennessee. I used to live in Tennessee. That's why I say that. We were talking just before the break, or just before we came on, and I said, hey, man, we're going to solve the world's problems in 12 minutes. And you said, well, we've already solved the problems. We just haven't implemented them. That's such a good line. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think as Christians, we know the answers. We have the fix. We have the person in Jesus Christ who fixes the world's ills. We've just got to do a good job of living out what the Bible really teaches concerning these issues and sharing that with others and getting the church especially on board. I mean, part of the problem that we're dealing with today is it's inside the church. I mean, we don't expect lost people to act like Christians, but it's time for Christians to really just live by the Bible and Scripture enough and alone is what should be our guide.
Yeah, that's such a good point that, we couldn't expect the world to live by Jesus's standards, but we need to. So I guess we could just focus on racism first and systemic racism and racism. How should we view this as Christians?
Well, I think we need to take the biblical perspective that racism is a sin. It's a horrible sin. There are many sins from the garden. We've found multiple ways to sin and treat others fairly. Put ourselves ahead of others. Lump people together, and acts of racism should be abhorred by the church. Part of the problem is specifically with critical race theory is it's a worldview. It's beyond just actions that certain sinners do. It's an analytical framework, if you will, that views the world as inherently racist. Systems are racist. It's counter to the way that the Bible speaks about the actions of individuals, because we can talk about different rules and laws and things that are embedded within our systems that are racist, and where those are, they need to be eliminated. And I'm sure you're familiar with redlining. It's probably been talked about multiple times. Policies that are in place that specifically target ethnic groups, that's unchristian. That's wrong. So when you talk about systemic racism, those would be the types of issues you'd be talking about where there's specific policies in place. But when you're talking about organizations that are run by humans, which would be all organizations, then you have the tendency that there's a risk there that people will act poorly. But the whole idea that the church is starting to buy into of systemic racism and inherent structures that have manifested themselves with calls for defunding police, things like that nature, that goes a step beyond what the Bible really says about sin and about society, and really takes it a step too far.
I think we've talked a lot about how this woke stuff, it's a cult, right? It has a lot of religious-y aspects to it. And I think that's what makes it very appealing to a lot of people who don't have Jesus, all right? Because they're looking for something to grab onto, and this kind of looks like a religion. So one of them is original sin, right? So the idea is that every white person's racist from your birth, from the culture, from everything, and there's nothing you can do about it, whatever. So if original sin's a thing, wouldn't that also mean then that all white people are racist too? So, right?
No, I think what original sin means is that all people of all colors have within them inherent, when you're unredeemed, you have tendencies, and even Christians still struggle with tendencies that are within all fallen humanity to treat other individuals in ways that advance your own cause and are unfair to them. And obviously, if you can get a group of people that look like you and will be on your team, and you want to exercise that sin, which the flesh really wants you to do, and then Satan, who I believe is a real entity, wants you to do, then you're going to manifest that sin in racism. But I don't think that's a strictly white problem. It's a problem depending on the cultural setting with when other minorities that we would consider minorities here are the majorities in other places. It's more of a group tactic. Just one of those skills that you can do as a thoughtful and manipulative person, if you're so inclined to be. And that's why the church doesn't like that mindset. We want to have the mind of Christ and treat people fairly and colorblind. That's another topic we can talk about, but we want to be colorblind as far as prejudging and doing what Dr. Martin Luther King said, judging people on the content of their character, judging on their actions, not on outward markers of color, pigmentation.
Yeah, let's speak to the colorblind, because anti-racism says you can't be colorblind. You have to see color first, really, and then you have to discriminate to make up for past discriminations. So how should that be viewed in the church?
Well, James 2 speaks about when you have a rich person and a poor person, but the same logic applies when you have a white person, a black person, Asian, whatever it might be. You're not going to not recognize what someone looks like. I mean, if someone walks in, you can't be colorblind and say, unless you have deficiencies in your eyesight, you can't not recognize those things. What biblical colorblindness is to treat each person the same way. When they come in, you don't give one a good seat and one sit at the footstool, sit on the ground over here. You don't treat people differently because of their skin color. That's what we mean by color blindness. We don't say, oh, well, we're all just exactly the same, because that's not true. I mean, we all appreciate our cultural upbringings, those things that you mentioned my accent, Tennessee, I'm very proud to be a Tennessean, but those things that make us different in ways that we look to as positives. But when you look to it as a way to treat one person better than another person, that's not really being colorblind in the proper sense. But the colorblindness where we want to treat someone, give them a higher voice, they're more up on the intersectional chain. They get first dibs on who gets the loudest voice because of their skin color or whatever that might be. That's the opposite of the way I was raised, the way Dr. King believes about judging someone on the content of their character. I think that the unique thing about Christianity is we're all in it together. We've all equally fallen short. We're all equally in need of a Savior. And so giving voice to everyone who has something to say is proper to the extent you're able to give everyone equal voice. That's what the strive is for. Not if you just push one group ahead in line, then you're pushing another one back. You're doing the same thing, but you're just reversing the ethnicity group.
It was because there's this push now to put different people of different ethnic groups and intersectionalities in leadership positions. And I remember MacArthur had a line about how on this Bible translation committee, you need to have one black person, one Asian person, one woman. And MacArthur said, what about someone who knows Greek and Hebrew? Right? But like that's not a consideration anymore. It has to be your skin color. Last question for you, Matt, and this is a tough one. So someone comes to you who's been discriminated upon or has experienced microaggressions in their life, and they're hurt by them. How should one mourn with those who mourn?
Yeah.
That's the first part. The second part is like when it's a microaggression. You know what I mean? Like versus, we quote Booker T. Washington on the show all the time, right? Like, I am a slave, right? So like you have that versus people who are experiencing microaggressions, but what's a Christian's role to not literally, but metaphysically or metaphorically, like slap them across the face and be like, hey, let's overcome this versus, oh yes, you're right, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. How should a Christian approach that?
Yeah, one needs to be careful on how to affirm what they're feeling because perception has become reality in America, as we've seen. And so these people who felt slighted, they have a legitimate feeling of being treated unfairly. There may or may not be something to that. But one thing we don't want to do is just dismiss it. We want to acknowledge how they're feeling. And then, I think in the best way possible, line that up with Scripture, and not to say that they're not an important person, but say, that these types of things happen to one degree or another. Sometimes they're related to race, sometimes they're related to weight, sometimes they're related to any type of discrimination you can think of. It's not just race that you're discriminated against, but to say that this is part of what sin is, and whether or not that person has sinned against that person, there's a restoration if they're Christians, a way to handle that, but also to let them know that there's always going to be mistreatment until Christ returns, and we have a solution, and that's where we really turn on its head and talk about forgiveness and forgiving those that have wronged us, even if they don't ask for forgiveness, because what you're doing is allowing someone else to decide how you're going to act and how you're going to live.
Yep. Or we have a doctrine of resentment, which is what all this woke stuff really is. Matt Stamper, Dr. Mark Stamper, Matt Stamper. It's Matt Stamper 8 on the Twitter. Matt, appreciate you, brother. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really good. Superb. Go Vols. That's our show. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.